Hey everybody, I'm Ebony. This is Ebonee's Creativity. Thank you so much for joining me here on my channel. Furniture flipping is a passion of mine, but in today's video, I decided to switch it up a bit, and that is because I'm ready to get a little bit more crafty. I have a series on my channel that I have not added to in a while, and it's called Did I Dupe It? And it's just a series where I take high-end pieces from major retailers, and I see if I can recreate a similar or exact replica of what they're selling for a fraction of the price. In this video, I wanted to challenge myself to not use anything that I don't already have in my house. So these are items that you likely already have in your home. And I'm going to be using some recycled materials, some old detergent containers, and just simply trash and a few products and materials. And I'm going to see if I can recreate this West Elm product for a fraction of the cost. In my case, free, because I'm using everything I already have. So if this kind of content is interesting to you, please like the video, subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and let's hop to it. Looking at this inspo pic, you can see that the hips on this figurine are very wide. So I'm going to be using the width of this Tide container to match that. I just traced the container onto a piece of paper so I can kind of play with where I needed to make my cuts for the opening of the legs and the V shape for the lady bits. So that's what I'm doing here, just tracing out my template so I can know where to cut. If you're going to try to do this, just get a really good utility knife. I have this one from Dollar Tree, which works okay in most cases. But in this application, it was kind of difficult to cut through. So you'll see I had to try a couple other methods eventually because it's really started to hurt my hand. I don't know if it's because the plastic is kind of pliable or if I just wasn't strong enough to get through it. I don't know, but it was kind of hurting my hand. So yeah, just use a better knife than the one I have. Or if you have some really sharp scissors, that probably would work too. As you can see, eventually I did get it to break off, but it was a journey. So now I flipped my container over and I'm doing the exact same thing on the back side. I know that we don't really have a V-shaped lady part on the back side, but for most of this project, I'm kind of just playing it by ear and doing what comes to me instinctively. I'm not a sculptor. I've never done something like this before, but I'm just doing what I think will yield the best result. So I definitely didn't want to overthink or try to have to create a new template for this back because it will just be covered up anyway. So now I'm struggling again to cut this, and eventually the idea popped into my head to get a lighter and try to kind of melt it and then cut it, and that really worked well. As I said before, I've never done something like this before, so this was just one of those ideas that kind of came to me as a result of the struggle. But once this plastic was heated up, it cut like butter, so that was a really good relief. I need this opening to be accessible, so I'm just going to pop this extra plastic off with a flathead screwdriver. And here's where we are now. As I said in my intro, my goal for this project is to do it using only things that I have on hand. So thinking about the inspo pic, the legs are really wide, and I started looking around my house for things that had the same size and shape. And what I found was these empty Bath and Body Works containers. I don't know why, but I keep all of my candle containers, even when the candles are long gone. And I'm glad I had 2 of them on hand because they were a great use for this project. So I just stuck the tie container down into the legs and taped that together. And now I'm kind of just taping across the crotch. And I'm going to be taping the scope bottle in here as well. But before I can tape it in, I have to cut off the bottom because I do want this to be a functional vase. So I need an opening. And that's what I'm going to be creating here by cutting off the bottom of the scope container. And this plastic was much easier to cut than the Tide container. So I've already added some tape to the Tide container that will hold the scope container in place, and some tape across the crotch, which will prevent it from poking through the bottom. And so now I'm just going to put the scope container into place. I thought it would have to do a lot more to kind of fill in the spaces where the 2 containers meet, but surprisingly, just adding tape was good enough to make my form. That's why you see the foil there. I thought I was going to have to bundle up foil. I have a pack of paper just out of the frame because I thought maybe I could stick paper there and then tape around it. But just using the tape gave me a solid enough foundation that I can put my paper mache on top of. So this started to come together much better than I even expected. Here is the backside of the inspo pic, and as you can see, she's got a big butt. So the only thing I could think of that could kind of mimic that was these two balloons. And I'm going to be taping those to the back of our form to serve as the butt cheeks. So here is my completed form after everything has been added, and I'm pretty satisfied with how it all came together. Here's the recipe for the DIY paper mache clay that I got from Ultimate Paper Mache here on YouTube. I'm starting out by wetting down some toilet paper and breaking it into small pieces. I'm going to be measuring out 1 1/4 cups of it, but before I do that, I just want to make sure that it's not too wet when I'm adding it to my measuring cup. So I'm going to squeeze out most of the water and then add my pieces into my cup to see when I get 1 1/4 cups. I used about 100 sheets of toilet paper. I have 2-ply toilet paper, so you may need to adjust up or down depending on if you have thicker or thinner toilet paper. The next item that you need to add is a cup of joint compound. The lady specifically said not to use DAP wood filler, so that's probably what you have on hand. She says that that does not react well with the glue in the recipe, so I don't know, but I'm just using this one that I got from Walmart. The recipe only calls for 1 cup of joint compound, but the more you have, the better, and you'll see why later on in the video. I think I might have gone wrong here because the ladies in the tutorial was really specific about what kind of glue to use. I had a little bit of this Elmer's, which is what she used. Well, she used glue all. I don't know if that's different from school glue, but what I had on hand to finish my measurement was just this Dollar Tree glue, so that's what I use. She did say some combinations of joint compound and glue would not work well together. I think I may have gotten one of those combinations that did not work well together, but I still ended up having a usable product. But if you're going to do this, probably try to use glue all like the lady in the tutorial did. I actually did a few things different from the lady in the video that I watched. She used a mixer, like a hand mixer, to mix her stuff. And you can see I pulled my Ninja out, but I was like, I ain't trying to get all this glue and joint compound all up in my mixer. The Ninja mixer can get kind of pricey. So I just tried to mix it by hand. Maybe that could have been kind of why mine didn't turn out like hers exactly, or the combination of products. I used different glue, different joint compound, and a different mixing method than her. What she did was to add the toilet paper and the joint compound and mix that up together, and then kind of slowly add the glue in and mix that in, and then the flour. So I just kind of threw all mine together and started to stir it up by hand, which I'm sure is not as effective as using a mixer. But like I said, I ain't trying to mess up my Ninja for this. I want to blame my texture issue on the glue instead of the drywall compound because my mixture seemed to be a lot stickier than hers was. But to compensate for that, I just added in extra flour, and that helped a lot with the stickiness. So whereas the recipe only calls for a 1/2 cup of flour, I probably used like 1 1/4 cups of flour just so that I could have a workable product. But it still worked out for me relatively well. But if you're kind of a stickler for the rules and you don't like to have to tweak things or think on the spot, you can go to her channel and follow her recipe to the T with the exact products that she used, and you will get a slightly different product from mine, but they both seem to work relatively well. Her outcome seemed to be a lot more spreadable, whereas mine was more kind of like Play-Doh consistency. And since I'm more familiar with working with Play-Doh than something spreadable, I was okay with what I came up with. I have not even thought about paper mache since I was maybe in elementary school, so this is definitely bringing me back to elementary aged Ebonee. But when I was in school, we used just a flour and water mixture with newspaper strips. So I thought this was cool. I had never even heard of paper mache clay before I started doing the deep dive, trying to figure out how I could make this dupe. So if you've never heard of paper mache clay, you learned something new today. So for that, you should like my video and leave me a comment and let me know if you used the flour and water and glue mixture for paper mache when you were in school as well. If your teacher was like mine, you blew up a balloon and you covered it with the strips, the newspaper strips, and then you made a planet Earth in your science lesson. So let me know if you have that memory as well as I do. At this point, I was thinking like, oh my God, this is going to be a fail because I was kind of having a difficult time applying this as my mixture started to kind of dry out. I thought I would run out, but I found that I was putting it on too thick. So I had to I started out with my hands kind of trying to just get it on there, and then my plan was to smooth it out later. But with my hands, I was grabbing too much material, and I'm guessing that's why the lady in the tutorial makes hers much more spreadable so that she can get a nice thin layer. But since mine was so thick, I was having kind of issues with smoothing it out. So I just stayed the course and I ended up getting somewhat smooth results. So just stick with me to see how this progresses. Don't judge it by how it's looking now because it's looking a hot mess and it's too thick and clumpy. But as I started to work with it more, I was able to kind of figure out a technique. So I pulled out this silicone spatula and that really helped me to get this stuff on here much better than my hands because it allowed me to use a thinner amount. So just stay the course. If you have the skill of icing cakes, like nice 3D big cakes, you'll probably be able to use those same products that you use for cake icing or like fondant. That's what it's called. Yeah, fondant. Those materials would come in handy for this, but all I have is a spatula. I ain't thinking about icing no cake, so I don't have all that stuff on hand. All I have is my hands and this spatula. So now that I've got it on here nice and glumpy, I'm just using the spatula because that's really all I have and kind of just thinning out all the chunky layers that I put. And I found that my product stretched a lot better, and I thought I was going to run out. I thought I didn't have enough, but once I got a thin enough layer on here, I had just enough product, so I was happy about that as well. At this point, I'm realizing that I definitely did the BBL version of this vase because I made the butt cheeks too big, but I just decided to keep it and go with it because everybody likes a nice, big, fat, juicy butt. So I'm just going to leave it, but it definitely caused me to have to get in there and stretch this material with my hands and kind of really make sure I covered that balloon well. And as you can see, I'm scraping the bottom of my bowl for material. But the good thing is that as this stuff started to dry out, it became like more like clay. And it became easier for me to like get whole pieces and lay whole pieces down. You can see me kind of like flattening and rolling pieces. And that wasn't happening in the earlier part of this. So I guess as some of the glue dried down, it became much easier to work with. So I was happy about that. I was actually able to like get some solid pieces to stick where I needed them to be instead of just kind of hoping that I could spread everything out with the spatula. So this is starting to go a little bit better than it was in the beginning. At this point, I've got my whole form covered, thank God, because I didn't have to end up needing to make another batch of material. And now I'm just using some water. I'm dipping the spatula into water and I'm finding that that's helping me spread this out and make it a little bit smoother. So I'm going back and forth between using the spatula and my hands just to kind of knock down the areas that are really rough. And when I'm using my hands, I've also dipped those in water just so everything is nice and wet and still able to be moved around. And I did want to show how I made the belly button. I kind of took some scrap pieces. These are like the last little pieces I could dig up out the bowl. And I just kind of made like a circle shape. But I ended up taking it off because it's a little bit too low. And I didn't realize that until I stood back and looked at it. But this is how I made it, even though I ended up moving it up. So here's how things are looking at the end of day one. I don't know why I put the belly button in the crotch, but again, I was so tired, y'all. This took me a lot longer than expected, but it still was really fun to do, so I'm glad that I did it. But yeah, you can see kind of a 360 view of it. And I'm going to go and put this in front of a heater and go to bed because I'm really tired at this point. Well, I was going to go to bed, but then I decided while this is still wet, I need to add in some of the body contouring and creases. So I just used the end of a small paintbrush to kind of highlight the leg folds that create the V shape. And then I went ahead and did the one on the small of the back. I forgot to do the one down the front of the stomach, but I will do that later. Okay, now I'm going to bed. Okay, so for day 2, my mission is to get this as smooth as possible. I have a couple methods that I want to try to see if I can smooth this thing out. So the first thing I'm doing is using another silicone spatula and just covering the whole thing with joint compound. I'm doing the thinnest layer that I could possibly do that helps to disguise some of the lumps and bumps. Everything has dried down really nicely from a night in front of the heater. So now I'm able to kind of see where I need to add more of the joint compound and where I can kind of do extra thin layers. That step really did help smooth things out a lot. And here is where we are now. So now you have a few options. You can use sandpaper if you'd like. This is just the same joint compound that you would use like for drywall, which is sandable, but it is not waterproof. And so I figured that if I just dampened a towel and wiped this, I'll be able to knock back a lot of the excess, and that's exactly what's happening here. So I'm almost able to like sculpt it into place just using water and a rag, and I love that because I really hate sanding. That's the part I hate the most about furniture flipping. So it's taken a long time, but I'm okay with that because I don't have to create a big huge sanding mess, and I'm just able to sit here and rub all the ridges down, and it's working out really nice. Here's a close-up so you can see what I'm talking about and the difference that it made. The left side is rubbed and the right is not, and then here is when both sides were rubbed down with the water in the rag. I almost forgot that I would need handles, and I wish I had like a bendy straw, but I didn't. So I just used another sheet of toilet paper and I kind of just glued it to where it would retain a round shape. And then I added just a little bit of joint compound on it so it would have the same texture as the rest of the piece. And then I got the idea to stick it in Mod Podge and just kind of let it dry so that it would maintain its shape. But then I got impatient and I didn't feel like waiting for it to dry. So I just kind of twisted it and made it flat on the ends. And I used the Mod Podge that was already on there to stick it to my form. There was a trend that people were doing a little while ago where you were adding baking soda to make a chalk style paint. I don't have any brushes available right now, so I'm just going to rub some baking soda on here prior to painting it. Then I'm going to use this matte black spray paint and go ahead and spray paint both my figurine and my eucalyptus that I pulled out of another vase that I had already. I wasn't 100% sure if that paint hack with baking soda works on spray paint, but I just decided to give it a try on this, which is out of my comfort zone because normally I don't try new things on my finishing steps. So I allowed all of that to dry, and without further ado, here is my finished look. I'm very curious to hear what you guys will say about this project in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. Did I dupe it? Keep in mind that I am not a sculptor. I do not know how to frost cakes. I don't ever do anything similar to this. So this was a first time try. I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Of course, it has some imperfections, but the bottom line is you can tell what it's supposed to be, and that's more than what I thought I would be able to accomplish. And I did this for free. I didn't have to purchase anything. It's all with things that are around my house already. So I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I think it looks pretty good to be the BBL version of the West Elm vase. So you let me know what you think in the comment section below. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you have the time, please select another one of my videos to watch from the choices on your screen or in the description box below. And I will talk to you all in my next video.